Welcome, Titus Gebel. How are you today and where are you at the moment?
Hello, I'm good and I'm sitting in my office in Monaco.
Fantastic. You are founder, president, and CEO of a company that is called Free Private Cities. Would you say that you write a little bit of history currently?
Well, it's a little bit too early to say that. I mean, at the end of the day, if you have a permit by a government, it's only worth so many, right? Then you need all the sub-level authorities to work together with you. You need investors. Then you need stability over a certain period of time. So on paper, yes, we have currently established something which is a project, I would say, unique. And it's a special zone that it's giving much more autonomy than from special economic zones. But it's still early days, and then so far I wouldn't be too enthusiastic. Many things still can go
wrong. We will, of course, get to know the idea better and break it down. Before, I would like to back up a little bit, and I think it's important, that people get to know you also as a person, because of course there's a lot of trust involved with such projects. Would you mind sharing a little bit your background, your story? How did you grow up, maybe? What were you interested at a young age, and how did you decide to become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I was born and grew up in Germany, most of the time in the Heidelberg region. And I was interested in music. I was also a drummer of diverse rock and punk bands for many years, and ska bands, and even went to television with the band and made some albums and CDs.
Can we look that up? Is it still on the internet? That'd be great.
Well, I think it was on Spotify still but maybe it's disappeared now. It was called Move On, the band. But I don't think it's available. That was in the early 90s, right? So I studied then law in Heidelberg, and eventually became a lawyer. And after about 5 years, I discovered this is not what I want to do until the rest of my life. And I wanted to create something rather than working as a service provider for other people. And so I switched into the industry, first biotech industry, then venture capital, eventually landed in the resources industry, which I found very appealing. It was real. I mean, you're really creating something. You're getting rocks out of the ground and then producing a metal. In our case, it was gold, silver, tungsten, later oil and gas. And we founded a company then, my partner and I, together in 2006. Was called Deutsche Rohstoff AG in Germany, which eventually went public in 2010 at Frankfurt Stock Exchange. It's still listed today. And we started with with 400,000 euro. And eventually the company reached a market valuation of 130 million. So that was a real success story. And I was president and CEO for about 8 years when we were so successful that I could retire. And that's when I moved with my family to Monaco. And from there on, I worked on my passion, which was also developed during the years that I found out, being always active politically in the freedom movement, in the classical liberal party of Germany and all that, and the Liberale Hochschulgruppe, the university groups and all that. And the outcome was that I found out that the ideas of freedom, free markets, and self-responsibility, which I think are very good values and which are necessary for humans to develop and to make it a peaceful and wealthy world, are not shared by the majority and you will never be successful in a normal society, be it a democracy or whatever, with those values. Because it's much easier to promise people that they're entitled to everything, and you will provide them with free lunch, no matter how you name it. And I thought, okay, what do I do now? Because I saw that society is moving already towards more totalitarianism, to more welfare state, more socialism. That was already visible 20 years ago, right? And it's not only now that you can discover that. That was, for me, obvious for a very long time. And so I thought, okay, what can I do about it? And the only thing that came to my mind is that instead of trying to convince people another 30 years of my ideas, I just create a different product and say, okay, you can look, and if you like it, you come, and if you don't like it, you just stay where you are.
I would like to know, because you mentioned that people are more in favor of free lunch. So you worked up a successful venture, and I think that's also maybe something interesting for the viewers. Can you share maybe your example, as a few examples also, like what's the hard thing, what were your learnings? And that probably also inspired you to say, okay, like building a venture is so much more difficult than receiving government subsidies in a way. What was kind of the personal experience that led to your motivation? And I think since you moved to Monaco, you also can share a little bit about the upsides and the downsides of Monaco and what attracted you there.
Yeah, of course. So I think lessons learned is, from my personal experience, is you really have to try out different things, and it's probably not happening that the first thing that you're trying out is successful, right? This is the first lesson learned. It's necessary to try out several things, because sitting on a desk and say, I'm developing a great idea, this plan will be challenged the day you go to the market, right? And most of the time it's not working, right? I've been in the venture capital business, as I said, and normal out of 10 companies, one is successful. Maybe 2 or 3 are okay. They maybe somehow make their own money, and all the rest will fail. That is the normal. So do not be surprised when your first venture is also not a success. That is the normal. Success is the exception. So you have to try it several times and then eventually find something where it works and all things came together. Second lesson is what I probably knew before, but was confirmed. Don't do what everybody is doing. I remember when I started, I found out by reading newspapers that there hasn't been anything in the resources sector for 20 years. People weren't even studying it any longer. Right, the biggest German resources company turned into a tourism company, and people don't want to become geologists or mining engineer any longer. So it was clear that at the same time the increasing demand from China was coming, there were no new mines brought into production. Right, the old mines were just depleted, and when they were depleted, they were closed. So and at the same time, you had an increased demand from China. So I said, okay, there's only one solution to that. You have scarce supply, but a lot of demand. The price is the only variable. That has, prices will go up, and a lot of projects will be profitable that haven't been profitable in the 80s. So that was the idea, and that eventually worked out. But at that time, even at that time, a lot of people said, what? The resources? Are you mad? Mining? That's totally outdated. And even my mother told me, hey, why don't you found a renewable company instead, right? And I said, Mother...
That would be my next... Can I interrupt you quickly? Because now we have somebody from the industry, which is also, as you mentioned, you were active in the libertarian groups at the university. Yeah. What's your number one argument when people come and say, but mining, that's bad for the environment?
Well, environment, you can do it this way or that way. Right? I mean, if you are, for example, if you have a gold mine which is state of the art, you will have basically no real environmental impact. There will be an impact with the kind of a water, but water which is in a tailings pond. But there is treatment methods which are long known since decades. So after a couple of years, this water is clear again. And then there's no environmental backlash. Of course, you have to survey that, but it can be done. So now if I produce a solar panel, I don't know how I'm going to recycle that, right? It is probably a big waste in a few years. So if people say, hey, I'm environmental friendly and you or mine are not, you look at the detail, right? I mean, you can make gold mining very dirty, of course, right? But if you do it the right way, and I would say all bigger companies are doing it the right way, because otherwise they getting grilled and toasted, right, by the press, then it's not an environmental problem. Most people who talk about that have no clue. They've never been to a gold mine in their whole life, and they say, okay, wow, that's a bad thing, right? It's like everything in our society. People have a big opinion about things they do not know about. Right?
I think maybe they see also the documentaries about the gold mines in Africa, which probably aren't regulated at all. And
these are wild artisanal gold mines. That's not what I'm talking about, right?
How much of the supply, of the world supply, is coming from such mines? And maybe what I always like to answer is also, people don't understand that actually, the natural state is poverty. And the question is what enables, a move forward. So now advanced mines have top-notch security and work conditions, and not like 50 years ago.
Absolutely. And as you said, these people in Africa with the artisanal gold and cobalt mining, they're doing this for a living, right? And what can you do about it? I mean, we have to prevent them by force to do that. And that is even happening if there are some mines there with big fences, but if you do nothing, they just do it because they say, okay, I can make money with that. And even if you tell them, but this is detrimental to your personal health, if you use amalgamates to get the gold off the rocks, they will not listen to you or some will, but others not. So, and you cannot blame gold miners that are keeping up with all the procedures, state of the art. You cannot blame gold miners for that. It's
okay, so
totally unfair. We have nothing to do with that. Right?
Yeah, a little bit of economics and politics here. Let's go forward to the question. Monaco, how is it there? How do you like it?
I like it much. Of course, it's not a perfect world, but I made an interesting observance. When I was here for about a year or so, I said, wait a minute, Titus, I'm here now quite a while, and I have zero interest to become involved into Monaco politics. Why is this so? I was always interested in politics. And then I asked myself and said, well, actually, I just want to be left alone and do my things, do my business. I'm leaving alone others, and I'm also willing to pay something for that, right? And then I asked around the other people here that I knew, and most of them have the same approach, right? They say, okay, we want to be left alone. The moment the Monaco is introducing all the European Union rules, we just move away, right? And that is also the good thing about competition. Monaco is such a small place. In theory, this is a constitutional monarchy. The prince has a lot of power. He can overrule all legislative initiatives from the parliament. He can come up with own laws and all that. But if he used that power to our disadvantage, we would just disappear. And 80% of the inhabitants do not have Monaco citizenship. So this is only competition, the fear of competition, that is keeping the country in line. And the good thing is that the government really thinks that they are a service provider for the people living here, and they must make them happy. Now, the downside of Monaco is that because it's so small, the real estate prices are exorbitantly high. So that normal guys who are working here mostly cannot afford to live in Monaco, which is not absolutely true. If you say 30% of the Monaco people are net millionaires, then you still have 70% more or less normal people, right? That is the situation. But I've spoken to bus drivers from Berlin, for example, and I said, "What? I heard you're from Germany, from Berlin. What are you doing? Why are you driving bus in Monaco?" And he told me, "Well, I was driving before buses in Berlin-Marzahn, which is not the best part of Berlin, right? And now I'm driving in Monaco. Where would you drive buses? Where would you prefer to drive bus? And I said, yeah, you're right. I mean, and here's the point. I mean, this guy, I think that he's even making 5,000 euro a month, but rent would cost him about 3,000. So it's really expensive. So most people, they decide better to live in France or Italy and then pay taxes, but commute. If Monaco was bigger, that was also one of the ideas I had for the free private city. This problem wouldn't be there. These people would all live in Monaco, not only work there, because everybody likes the system. You have great security there. That was also for me very important. I can send my children on the street at midnight without having fear that they are robbed or hijacked or whatever. Which is great. And in what place in the Western world can you do that, right? And the other thing is that it's, of course, there's no direct tax. There are taxes, but there are no direct taxes, which is a good thing, right? You pay some taxes, but mostly indirect taxes. And Monaco is financing 50% of their state budget out of value-added tax. And the other thing is that they have a reserve of 1 or 2 years of expenses. Right? Compare this with other countries, which are all in debt, right? And they have money on the bank for a full year expenses. So this is it's something that is really working. That is attractive. Of course, because it's so small, there are some things. If you want to start a company, that is not so easy, and of course, there's a lot of cronyism also in the company world. At least I suppose that it's not so easy for me as a newcomer to compete with the companies that would be here for a long time, for building projects, for example. But you have a lot of elements from Monaco which can be taken over for other new societies.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to maybe for people who aren't yet familiar with the idea, we jumped over that in the beginning. So I talked to people about the project, and I recommend the book, of course, many times. It's still very abstract. So I talked to business leader, and as you mentioned, usually it sounded so so interesting that you said I moved to Monaco and I wasn't involved in politics anymore because all I want is to do my business and be left alone. Still, most business people think the state is inevitable. There is no alternative. It's necessary to do business, to have law and order. But then in your book, you argue that if you see the government as a service, then it should be possible that basically any entrepreneur, any decent entrepreneur, could probably do a way better job providing these public services than a bureaucratic government. What's holding back innovations in governance in your eyes?
Yeah, should I give an overview about my system idea first so that people get it? Or
sure, yeah.
Yeah, so we are talking about a concept that I call free private city. And the idea is relatively easy. It's just that the private company, instead of, if you take Monaco, replacing the prince by a private company, and this private company offers you the basic services of the state, which is the protection of life, liberty, and property, right? And in exchange, you pay a certain fixed amount for those services per year. And this amount and your respective rights and obligations, then they are laid down in a written agreement between you and the provider, state provider or government provider. And apart from that, you are free to do as you choose. And the difference is that you are now a contracting party on an equal footing with a real secured legal position instead of being subject to the ever-changing whims of politics. And you can only become part of it if you like the offer, right? I mean, this is something that I'm also finding out that many people do not understand. What is the big advantage of a contract? Well, look, if you think that the other party, the service provider or the state, has not fulfilled his part of the contract as providing security or good services or streets or whatever you paid for, then you can go to court and say, I want my money back, or I want you to fulfill the contract. And that is absolutely impossible in the states of today, right? It's not possible. You have no right to do that. You say, you're wasting my taxes. Bad luck, right? And if you now what I can offer is it is a law and order system, because you have rules and you agree to those rules in advance. You sign those contracts. So there are rules and there is order. I guarantee the order. But I cannot change the order. So if there's a new guy coming as a CEO of this or city manager, he cannot just change the rules or the consideration you're paying. So this is giving you basically something that you already knew. If you are hiring a service provider, a tax accountant or a doctor or a dentist, you normally know in advance what the cost will be and what services he will provide. And and you can just take this idea and put it over to the relationship between you and the state. But the state would be replaced by a private company, which would fulfill, you can call it a government provider or a state provider, state service provider. They would provide the same services, right? And what you're now coming back to your question, why do I think that this system is superior to the current state? The answer is incentives. The incentive structure, incentives are explaining basically everything. If you are given the wrong incentives, then you don't have to wonder that things fail, right? And it was Charlie Munger, the famous partner of Warren Buffett, who said, "Show me the incentives and I'll predict the outcome." And if the worst thing that can happen to you as a politician is that you are voted out of office with all your pension, right? That is the worst thing that can happen to you. So you have absolutely no incentive to prevent that there is a financial damage to the society done, because you don't care. You have your pension. The worst thing can happen, you lose some power, right? But you have zero economic disadvantage from your decisions. And that means a lot of hazardous decisions, stupid decisions. Whereas I, as a service provider, as a for-profit entity, private company, private city provider, I mean, if I do wrong, two things will happen. My customers will leave, I will lose reputation, and eventually I go bankrupt. And I cannot expand, cannot start new companies, cannot make money. And these are very, very strong incentives compared to what our politicians have.
Many people are unhappy with the current system, but the only option they see is either vote maybe for a different party, or start a movement, or inform their friends maybe with ideas, or have let's say a community startup. You are the only one so far that really has said, okay, it has to be a business approach, and that's I think is maybe more promised to be successful, because you also are financially rewarded and to be successful. How does this project look as an investment case? And I also would be very interested in your sales process. What are the objections? What is the challenge here? I guess it's like a pretty complex procedure.
Yeah, well, actually, it's not so difficult. The main business idea is that you can make money out of land transactions. Ideally, you buy the land, then you get your autonomy from a state, from an existing state. All land is taken, so you have to go to a state, convince the state that it's a good thing to allow a free private city or prosperity zone, or however you call it. Because on uninhabited territory, nothing is happening there, but then investors are coming, people are coming, so it's a win-win situation. That is the most difficult part of the story, is to convince states to make it happen. We are in negotiations with two governments. One is very advanced. Basically, we already have the permit. We talked about that in the beginning, but it's still not finalized, the whole project. But it's possible. And then it's relatively easy. So you buy the land, you get your government autonomy, and then you create your own system, which is more attractive, more business friendly, more stable, more secure than most of the other systems in the world. So better than first world, one of the slogans. And then the price of the land will increase, and you just sell or lease some of those land, and then you make money along with that. For the government services, you probably will not make money in the beginning. You will have to subsidize those until you have about 10,000 people. Then you are starting to make money with that.
Now you will eventually also run into space problems, such as other examples like the big cities, Singapore, Hong Kong, maybe also have limited space, or Shenzhen. I would like to ask you a question which you probably like. There's this book, The Seen, the Unseen, and the Unrealized: How Regulations Affect Our Everyday Lives. We probably know it, and it deals with the fact that it's hard for us as citizens to see the actual harm done by government intervention and done by the wrong setup of our living together market, as you call it. So can you maybe inspire us a little bit? How do you envision the future? Do you see like metropolis? What kind of technologies? What kind of culture? What will be possible in the next decades when competitive governance basically appears?
Yeah, I think you made a good point by telling that people do not see the disadvantages because they only see what they get, right? And there's only one reality. But the moment you have a competitive governance system like mine that is basically only giving the framework of protection of life, liberty, and property, and within that framework, things can develop. Of course, there will be disputes because people have different interests, but there's no top-down solution. So we can try out a lot of things, and people will find out what's working and what is not working. Well, this is how markets work, right? It's trial and error. And that is why I'm sure that my system is superior, or similar systems are superior, because it's an evolutionary system, right? You have trial and error, and then you have basically reproduction in the things are copied that work, and you have selection. Things that do not work disappear, right? And that is how nature works. And why should it be different in our living together? It always was like that. Things that were positive were copied by others, and eventually they prevailed. And then the next invention was coming. So I think the more different societies or governance types you have, the more competition is there. The learning curve will be steeper because you can try out more different things. And then, as I said, I mean, in 50 years from now, probably the most successful systems will be nothing that has somebody thought about today. It will not subscribe to any of today's ideologies, probably, right? It's just, we don't know. And that is the beautiful thing, that you basically are, from a philosophical standpoint, you're creating a framework where a spontaneous order can develop, right? The competition as a method of development and discovery. And that is what convinces me. I'm not saying, okay, I'm going to create the perfect system. No, but I'm creating a framework where competition can show what works and what doesn't work. And so, well, maybe people at the end do not prefer to live in metropolises. They prefer mid-sized towns, right? Maximum 35,000 people. And then you have another 35,000 people town just next to it. Something like that might happen.
Mm-hmm. You have an architect on your advisory board named Patrick Schumacher, and he uses technology and innovation also to think about the future of architecture. And I think one of his main arguments is really that public planning is also not, the final result. We can maybe do better. And he envisions very large areas to be organized with more harmony and a better system. Have you been brainstorming about like city planning, especially when you start from scratch? Right, you may want to do it way advanced, more advanced than today, putting maybe all cars below Earth or something like that. What's the plan?
No, we have discussed. Patrick and I have discussed those things several times. I mean, there's one thing that you should keep in mind is you have diverging interests here, right? Once you say that is also Patrick's idea, the market-based urban order, which is basically our free market approach. That we do not know what the needs of the people were. So don't make any planning or limited planning and let people just buy what or build what they want, and then over time these cities will develop and change their views. On the other hand, you want to attract people, so you have to be attractive, it has to be good looking. So you have to do some planning if you want to be beautiful, if you want to be attractive. So the compromise we found is that you have maybe an inner core of the new city where you say, this is how we like to look it, right? And you only say, okay, this will be planned, and you have a maximum height and all that, and maximum in a certain style. And for the rest, you only keep free the roads, and maybe an airport or industrial area shouldn't be a living area. But then you have areas which I call the freak zones, where people really can do whatever they want. But they know in advance, right? If you prefer to live in a quiet environment, you better don't move there. You better move into our planned city part, which is beautiful, and parks and all that, instead of the freak zone where some guy might build a pink skyscraper just in front of your garden. But if you know this in advance, it's fine, right? So probably the more crazy, the younger people would maybe go to the freak zone, and then I don't know, right? But I think, again, the outcome of the discussions we had is really, we should give different approaches a chance, and then just watch and observe what's happening.
Yeah, I love that. It's fascinating to think about that. What would happen if creativity would be completely unleashed and people would just go ahead? And I think kind of like, in Berlin, people attest that, yeah, it's so diverse in the different areas. Of course, Berlin is more of a negative example, but
it has these elements. I mean, I'm often in Berlin, and it's kind of, it's a problematic city because they're living on the expense of others. But there is a lot of innovation there and creativity, no doubt about that.
I would like to have your thoughts and opinion, maybe also dealing with or referring to what you mentioned, that the idea here is based on a very strong philosophy, right, of free markets, of the natural order, of Austrian school, of the Austrian School of Economics as well. So you probably are very familiar with the 19th century based on a gold standard, where all around the world there was sort of a high productive culture and also a low time preference, right? And for some reason, these cities like Berlin, Vienna, or Paris especially, right, they've been built so beautiful that we can only like stand in front of a house and then compare it to a postmodern house and just say, like, what happened here? Like, why are suddenly the ceiling heights only half, right? And why is there no beautiful facade anymore? And what happened with the quality approach? Can you talk about that a little bit? What do you think about that?
Yeah, something went wrong, obviously, and probably many reasons for that. But I think the stability that you mentioned in the 19th century was certainly due to the gold standard, where you imagine if you have a currency that can be manipulated, you have stability. And I remember from stories from England that people really, if they served some years in the army, they got a pension for the rest of their lives, and they could really count on that, right? Could say, okay, if I get my pension today, in 30 years from now, I now will have the same purchasing power. And then you can plan your life. You can say, okay, I serve some years in the army, then I make my own business and whatever, right? Or I have a pension from a company I was working for. So this is giving you a lot of stability, security, and that has all disappeared. And in so far, it's also, I think, the more money you put into the hands of people who don't have skin in the game, which are elected politicians, for example, they will waste the money, right? And people who will have all kinds of ideas and say, well, we just take the money which the taxpayer has given me, and we build all kind of crazy stuff. In a 19th century environment, you would have to find investors to put that into the buildings, and probably they would have said, well, this is an ugly building, I'm not going to invest into that, right? But maybe there are other explanations, there are many things why this happened. But I think if we have a more stable environment money-wise, if we if people are responsible again for themselves, they will be more cautious, they will be more prudent, they will be more realistic in their assumptions. And eventually, I think we can regain that high standard that we had in the past, because people will then really acknowledge excellency, they will acknowledge beauty, and there are people who are just talking and doing crazy stuff because they are paid by the state. They will just disappear because there is no state that is just subsidizing them for whatever, just talking.
I want to move to my absolutely favorite question that I'm most excited to ask, of course. Your take on Bitcoin. It's unconfiscatable and seems like it's growing without stop. Do you believe? Have you researched it? Can it out innovate the other currencies?
Yeah, I think so. It has the potential. I mean, I'm an investor since I think 2013 or 2012. So I've been early.
Then you may not even need to find investors, right? You can self-fund your project.
Yeah, no, but it's. I mean, look. I mean, as you know, there are many other cryptocurrencies, and we don't know who will eventually prevail. Yet now Facebook is coming with this Libra idea and all that. But I think Bitcoin has a lot of advantages, and from all the cryptocurrencies, I think it's the best because it's the biggest, the most brain power goes into the further development, so that all the features that are supposedly not there, speed, privacy, they can be somehow modulated within the Bitcoin framework. So I think that eventually Bitcoin, the BTC, will prevail. And the problem that we have, and will probably have for a while, is too volatile to really be a currency. Mm-hmm. But there will be a time when it will be. I think that I might be wrong, but there will be a time when it's more stable, and then. Or take countries like Venezuela or Zimbabwe. People already were using those cryptocurrencies, Bitcoins, because of the trouble they have with their fiat money, right? And
in your video, which is excellent, this 1 minute short explainer video, there is a Bitcoin ATM. You can see, so you already thought far ahead. It's really great. How do you deal though with the international treaties and maybe banking licenses and all this international regulation? Regime, basically. How do you deal with these licenses?
Okay, so we have a project in a Central American country where we have an autonomy being granted by the government, which comes relatively close to a free private city. It's more public-private partnership special zone, but it's coming close. But for example, one of the things is that we have to regard all the international agreements that this country has conducted. And there's also these anti-money laundering banking regulation. So we cannot escape that. If we escape that, a lot of pressure would be put upon us by the country and by other countries. So we cannot afford that. No, we can afford that. So we have to stick with those rules. But on the other hand, it is possible in the meantime. And there are banks who are offering Bitcoin accounts. It's starting slowly, but it's coming. And I think it's unstoppable because there's a market need. And fortunately, we have still 193 or so countries. And they're all competing in a way. And if a country think it will have a special advantage by permitting cryptos, it is going to happen. And that's already happening. And so I have not too much doubts. There will be a lot of attempts to stop Bitcoin. But I don't think that they will get 100% support from all countries. So I think we have a good chance that Bitcoin is really becoming more mainstream, and then it's unstoppable. Then it's game over basically for the manipulated currencies.
Mm-hmm. A very interesting, fantastic thoughts here. I would like to lead over to a more philosophic question again. So I would like to have your definition of agorism, maybe. So we see that people make their own decisions more and more. They're not anymore so loyal maybe to their governments. They are traveling the world. They go where they're treated best, and they choose Bitcoin because it's better, even though maybe it's, in a regulatory perspective, it's uncertain and it may be banned in some areas. Maybe you could also put it together with the question, in your eyes, what's really going on in the world as a whole right now? We see there's like almost like two poles. At some side, on one side, the government is increasing, but then also the market seems to be really, really powerful and strong. How do you bring this together? Is algorithm in the end winning, the free market winning?
Well, it's indeed a diverging development, right? You have these more and more centralism, globalism, one world government, right? And then what is happening in China, that people are getting points for their good behavior, and if they misbehave, they are not allowed to buy train tickets any longer. That is a very frightening development, because the technological possibilities for central governments, they are really, really strong now. On the other hand, it's also a chance for people to escape those systems. And I think that the big centralized governments are more and more losing grip because they are just unsteerable, right? I mean, if I compare the Germany of today with the Germany I experienced 30 years ago, I must say that the administration is becoming more and more incapable of understanding things, of dealing with things. And the interesting thing is that the innovation cycle is so going so quickly that you have a new innovation and they just do not have the time to understand and regulate it. And when they have regulated it, there will be a next one. So we have a chance, but an algorithm in the sense that you just take yourself out is not working, because if they come after you, right? So like in China, right? I mean, if you just say, I don't want to hear from you, and they say you didn't vote, it's your obligation to vote. So you're putting in a prison camp. So then you can be an agorist there. So I think what we need is really a safe space, and that is what I want to provide with free private cities. On the other hand, it still makes sense to go algorithm in a sense that you try to be capable of living your own life, not relying on a state, but you probably have to link yourself with others so that you can support each other over the countries and continents. You can say we are building some self-help groups or whatever. I think this is going to work. And this is something that is possible with technology. It wasn't possible 20 years ago, that you can have, well, now you're probably sitting in Malta, I'm sitting in Monaco, we're just having a call and seeing each other. That wasn't so easy 10 years ago, right? So this is all possible, that people sitting in India can work for us, and the unions are after us. And what can they do? I mean, these people are not registered because they're not here, they're in India. And so it's very difficult for them, for the status to cope with this development. But on the other hand, they're getting more and more oppressive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we see it in Hong Kong happening, right? And it's actually positive to see that the citizens of Hong Kong are so aware of the threat they're facing and so active to protect their city. I would like to ask if you have actually been speaking and presenting in Hong Kong. I think they would be very open also for the idea. And I know I also want to ask you, because you're very humble also, so you don't mind speaking in front of Bitcoin meetup in Malta in front of 5 people or 10 people. Why are you motivated to explain it even, in front of 5 people, which is kind of like a waste of time?
Yeah, but I mean, look, I want to spread the idea. Why do I want to do that? I think the idea has, and it's not only my idea. I mean, the idea is based on the thoughts of great thinkers. So we are standing on the shoulders of giants, right? But this is just for the development. I think this idea makes sense, especially for people who have realized that the free market is working and that the centralized planning is not working. so why do not use this for our living together? And I want to spread the message, because if I fail, which may be the case, right, then others can pick up. And the more people have it in their heads, the better it is. What motivates me is also the experience I've made with the revolution in the communist East Germany. I was on the western part, but I followed this. I was in my early 20s at that time. And what really frightened me was then when it was clear that the old government, the old regime has to go. People were sitting together in so-called round tables in all the cities and communities and think, okay, what do we do? And there was only one topic. How can we make socialism more democratic? And what I want to do is, there was no other idea about freedom, market, liberty. It wasn't just not there in the University of Ideas. So what I want to do is, for the next regime change, which is coming, right? I don't know when, but it's clear. The ancient regime is not lasting forever. Probably maybe 20 more years, then it's over. But what is happening then? If the only alternative is again some kind of socialism, I mean, the same thing will happen again. And so what I want to do is that there is something else. It's not only democracy and dictatorship. There's also self-determination, right? You have a service provider who's taking care of the security issues, which are the most important. But then you decide on your own what political cases you want to support, what insurances you will pay, what the education of your kids should be. That is your decision. And once people have realized that this is possible in theory, it will be possible in practice one day.
I believe so. You are a very experienced and successful entrepreneur. And one question I would like to know, what's your trick? Such a difficult ambition as a pre-private city, to install a pre-private city, probably needs a little bit of luck also, right?
Yes.
On the way. Do you have a secret method to be lucky, to get lucky, to kind of direct the venture? Is there something that you try?
Well, I mean, it's still open if I'm successful or not in the free private city model. But I think what is very important is to surround you with with experienced people, right? It's you have a lot of enthusiastic young libertarians, but you need people who have really real world experience in business and all kinds of stuff. Because all the experience these people have made, you do not have to repeat them. And ideally, you have people who have already negotiated with governments, and you need IT people and all that. So my idea is to collect the best people that I can collect amongst, or can assemble around myself to help me with that. And luckily, many people are really enthusiastic about the idea and are willing to support even for smaller money the project, which is helping a lot. But at the end, we have to be professionalist and do it as a business, right? Not as a group of enthusiasts making it for charity. No. If you organize this as a business, is much more pushy. And I think this is the main difference to all the other projects. That this is a business here that's for profit, and that is forcing us to a kind of discipline which the others do not have.
Yeah, it's an exciting business, and I feel like there's maybe also this this culture of the frontier, right? So this is the people that are in the team. They must be very they're inspirational characters, I believe. We're coming to an end, and I have a final question for you, which is the good old Timothy Ferris billboard question. I like that, so I steal it from him. If you would have to design a billboard somewhere, take a country, wherever, maybe in Germany, in Berlin, what would be the single message that you would put on it?
Yeah, this has to do with free private cities, of course. It says the only real problem with mankind is that people seek to impose their will on others. That's it. The only real problem is that people seek to impose their will on others. And what this means is we therefore must create an order which prevents this from happening, right? And this is also bringing me back to what you said, okay, this is my free market ideas and philosophical Austrian school. Yes, but it's not necessarily. If you want to create a private city which is completely based on other ideas, this should be also possible. The voluntary participation. And this is something people do not understand, right? They think mankind has all kinds of problems, climate change and environment and resources. No, we can deal with that. But it's difficult to deal with other people forcing you into a Chinese system, for example, because they are more, right? And they have more guns. That's the problem.
Titus, thank you so much for the interview. It has been a pleasure speaking with you, and of course, only the very best of success for your idea.
Thank you. It was a pleasure for me too.